We're ready to start, Peter.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Temple Bar Trust lecture. We're very honoured to have Eric Parry talking to us this evening, who has an amazing range of work in the city, from the tallest tower to the deepest Livery Hall. And we're going to hear about 2 Livery Halls this evening. But before we start, I'll just explain to people who maybe haven't been to one of these before why it's arranged by the Temple Bar Trust. The Temple Bar Trust is about to bring Temple Bar in Paternoster Square back into civic use. It's going to be used by the Worshipful Company of Chartered Architects as its home, place for court meetings, but also for a place for education, a place for encouraging young people to come to learn about architecture, to learn about the city and how it works. And we are branding Temple Bar as the architectural gateway to the City of London. This is something we've been negotiating now for some years, and it looks as though in the post-COVID environment, we're a couple of weeks away now from signing the lease for the arch itself, designed by Sir Christopher Wren, completed in 1672, and also for Paternoster Lodge next door, which will give us space for meetings. So we're almost ready to sign that. And we will be having a few events there running up to Christmas, and then in the new year, we will start work on the building to decorate it, bring it up to modern standards, as it were, for catering and for presentations. And that's all very exciting, so that we can then in 2022 celebrate the 350th anniversary of the completion of the building. And that, of course, is the year before we also then celebrate 300th anniversary of the death of Sir Christopher Wren himself. So we see ourselves in Temple Bar very much engaged with those, and we're very proud to be shortly to be the leaseholders of a Christopher Wren building. So when we take over Temple Bar for the Worshipful Company of Architects, it will be the smallest hall, but now we're going to hear about 2 other halls, one completed and one being contemplated. And I look forward very much to hearing Eric talk about them. And after that, we will have time, hopefully, for a few questions and answers. So if you put your questions into the chat, they will then be forwarded on to myself and Eric, and can discuss them afterwards. But let's now go to Eric. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Peter. And it's such a pleasure, actually, to be talking about Livery Halls on the eve of us acquiring our own home. So I think that's very prescient. I think that although my first sort of significant architectural project beyond artist studios, which are significant, of course, but in a larger sense of community, was for a Cambridge college at Pembroke, and one got to understand something of the culture of community and what it meant. Actually, I didn't really know the depth, the extraordinary depth of the City of London halls. This may not be all, and we're not on that list yet. So you know, it will be so good to be there. But I kind of having got involved with the Honourable Company of Leathersellers, I began to understand that, rather like those colleges, they are they're sort of houses of conversation. So they are about conviviality. They are about coming together from very disparate backgrounds with some commonality, obviously historically, with the trades and making. And I think if one looked through this list, it is extraordinary how much it has to do with crafting, and that very, very grounded sense of life. So I think one of the other things that struck me was actually difference, but also commonality. And in my journeying with members of the committee at the Leathersellers, we looked at many, and it's interesting. There aren't that many contemporary halls yet. I'm sure there will be more to come. But for instance, the Salters was a very interesting combination, where Basil Spence had the commission for the architecture and actually did all the fixed items, so all the paneling here in the dining space. But extraordinarily, there one of the then became the master was this great interior decorator, David Hicks, who provided basically the textiles, the colors, and very important sort of sense of the setting. Indeed, there's also to his own garments, and paid homage to tradition, but in a very contemporary way. It's had a retrofit. I haven't had the privilege of seeing that yet, but when I did go around before that, there were still echoes of really interesting dialogue between continuity and the modern. Some amazing seats with wonderful piping on them, I remember, and other vestiges of this extraordinary dialogue. I think in his own words, he might not have kind of had Basil Spencer's first choice, but it all worked out incredibly well, and it's now been given a very much improved setting. The halls, as I say, this idea of a house of conversation has very ancient roots, obviously, which is another project rather than tonight's. But it goes right back to that idea of in the ancient city of the bouleuterion, the sort of the dining space, the city dining space, so to speak. And it's very clear also that in its tradition, it is a cyclical purpose that has ultimately charitable roots in terms of the ability of different livery companies to distribute, to encourage their own trades and other charitable exercises. So, the goldsmiths, which is this incredibly splendid space, very richly decorated, they continue to be a very important part of the goldsmithing and jewelry making world. Hugely supportive of that. I don't know quite where the armourers are now. I'm not professing to be an expert by any means, but we did have a meeting, and it's a formidable history of incredible craftsmanship and tunement to metalwork, obviously, amongst others. And the same is certainly true of both the Clothworkers and the Leathersellers. So the Clothworkers have been, and everything I will talk about, it's a work in progress. But I'm talking about that which is in the public domain on this through the planning process. But the Clothworkers have been on their site for, I think I'm right in saying, 500 years. They've been subject to fires, to being blitzed, so this is their seventh, or will be their seventh. They're currently in their sixth hall on the same site, which is incredibly significant. For us, first communication with the Clothworkers was actually for our project just across the street. This is their site, where they have freehold elements, which was the site for the Generali building, now M&G's headquarters, with its public garden on top. So yeah, there's this sort of sense, like actually colleges in Cambridge, for instance, where one college will be rubbing up against another, and there will be, you know, historic documents that enable development. Same thing here, as the freeholder, our client, the leaseholder, had repeatedly to be drawn into progress and to agreements, obviously, with the Clothworkers. Northwards of this, you can also see St Helens Place, which is where we will get to at the latter part of this this talk. But there it is. I think, you know, up to the east we have Aldgate, and I'm always thoughtful of Chaucer being the guardian of the gate, living on the gate. At this eastern edge of the city, and the medieval structure, which is so pertinent with the great belly here of Fenchurch Street. And obviously then you get the 19th century infrastructure of the station at this point, and a space, no, great spillage out and sucking in by night. And our passage, which was a small passage before, is very much part of that route through the site northwards, with the Willis buildings and so on beyond. And how important the Vinellas, these alleys and passages, are. And you know, actually, this site, as you will see, is a suitable subject for treatment in urban terms, and that was the sort of starting point of the journey. The site of the hall is shown here. There are elements, you know, very much hemmed in, but this church, All Hallows staining tower, which is very ancient, was sitting here, although at this point even it had lost its nave. But you can see a hemmed in public space with these passages running through, and how that, with Mincing Lane, you know, how that took a of the fifth hall took a complete blitzing. So you can see in the background behind the proudly standing tower, which obviously survived the fire. You know, behind it is the remnants of the fifth hall, and the viewing of the debris there. So on the back of this, there is a temporary structure made, and there are more complexities that we will come to. But this is the site as it stands. So this is the garden at 120, and here you have an aerial photograph of the hall, which is the dining space, which is the big space in these livery companies generally, is at the center. And then around it, there's a parade of corridors and rooms, and then a collection of buildings which have been drawn into the ownership of the Clothworkers over time. There is a graveyard here, and there is a Vinella here that is like a broken arm, really. It sort of runs under this building and then through here, and that is the extent of the public access to this whole site, effectively. So our job was to think about, given the gauntlet, if you like, or the challenge of seeing how this site might be developed, the consequences follow. But here you can see the view as if you're coming out of the station, moving forward. This was at a time when our building was under construction across the street. And here is a church hall, actually the Church Hall of St. Olaf's in the city, another great site. And then the tower behind it. The land has accumulated and sort of risen around the tower. So just a notable point in terms of our proposition. So in a nutshell, the idea was to decant, to take down the post-war building of the Clothworkers and the buildings along Fenchurch Street, to replace that area that is inaccessible to the public with a public space, which is so important as a breathing space as you're either coming up from the south or coming from the station to the east, to celebrate the tower by reducing the landscape level to closer to its original, to create an outline of the nave of the church as it was, and then there's a crypt space that is adjacent to the tower. It's actually got into by the tower at the moment. That was actually relocated here in the 19th century, and the intention is to move that, but to make it publicly accessible once more from lifting and within the building that will be built on the existing hall site, which has then another horizon, which is a horizon at the 10th floor, which is public, and it equates to the lower horizon of landscape here, thus forming a kind of cascade of landscape from 120 down onto that level and then down here. So the increase in public accessibility is 36-fold that which exists at the moment. And then the building itself is stepped as a tower and has an accessible space for the users of the tower. I'm not going into great details, obviously, on the development of the commercial space, which will enable the Clothworkers then to be relocated around this light well, with the dining space under here, so a subterranean space, a little deeper than the Leathersellers. But this gives you an idea of the proposition. So taking away the existing, rehousing it underground, giving the company offices and some flats and an entrance into the subterranean world on the street, so that there's a clear signal of the Livery Company's position, with the commercial building riding across and then above in the tower. So this is the existing condition. By agreement, the parish hall is moved to a site closer to St. Olaf's in the city. And as I said, the unseen part of this, of course, is arranging the site and the leasehold so that a development could take place. And this is what the public realm will look back like. It's actually, when one looks at this is a very, very uncomfortable urban moment. It's so tight that your only breathing space is to step into a doorway. It's ram-packed with people, and it's really difficult to negotiate. So the idea is to widen this pavement considerably, creating a kind of super-scaled structure that is part of the wing that rises to the 10th level that you can see outlined here. So this is really generous, with entrances to the commercial building, with its cores, obviously, its servicing, and its, not least, its bike storage, encapsulated in this area, and then to create the public realm, and to create, very importantly, the entrance, which is like a double cube, and then entrance to offices, but also the ceremonial entrance, which will take you in with these great views around this exedral window into the public space, and then down, as I'll come to describe, to descend. And the decorum of descent is incredibly important. It's a question that I'll come to with the Leathersellers as well a bit later. But just to say that the other part of so this is placed as open to the public, and then the other part is access to the crypt, which lies below this. These are the public lifts taking you up to the 10th floor, which is a double floored space, as I say, for public use within, and a winter garden, which is all seasons, and then lots of external space as well. So just the obvious thing is that the first thing to unlock is the public domain in the urban structuring, and that sort of sense of accessibility, which is so critical, courtesy of space syntax, by the way. Early sketches that are about how you negotiate the scaling to the street. So there's a tower, but it doesn't hit the ground in a plaza or something. It has this 10th floor level, which is public, and it rises above that. There is this lower element, and then there is the head this sort of slightly atlas-like idea of the Livery Company being exposed through its entrance at this point. And then from the other side, early before that exedral end to the south, but the idea that you could have lots of animation come into a south-facing space that is really well protected from the wind, is nicely planted, and has this sort of idea of landscape running across to 120. So this is developed with Christopher Bradley Hole and his team as the landscape architect. Very elegant, I think, solution to the hard and the soft, and enough area for loitering, for sitting, and so forth, and a kind of sense of animation along this east-facing flank. It's 17 meters here, so it's quite it's a wonderful scale. It sort of allows visually the tower to slip under this, as it were, and creates for the first time this sort of sense of openness around the tower. So this is the idea for the building. These are these mighty piers that pace the street to give the widened space. This is the entrance into that double cubed space with the tower and the light well beyond. Then the levels of offices, and then tucked away residential accommodation for the Livery Company. And this is its scaling. So a very important sort of haptic presence of material here, which is echoed then in the commercial building to some extent, but certainly in these large elements. And the soffit of this is also in this idea of a glazed faience. So yeah, just as you go, the entrance to the building, a reflection of some of the work we've done with glass and ceramic, and then a little bit more detail to the public realm. But then the close, a very close work with conservation and with Historic England to provide security to the tower, almost planted, to keep a certain degree of moisture, but structurally cut away beneath, so that the tower will be given a long life, obviously, and has a central presence. but you get the idea of the entrance here, offices above by and used during the day, so good lighting, natural lighting. Then the staircase that cuts you down always with a view to the tower as you descend to this lower winter garden that's getting top light, which becomes part of the order for any livery company that is coming in from the busyness of a day to take off your coats. Cloakroom is very important. To be met is very important, and then to mingle before a dinner, so informal conversation, and then to the serious business of dining. So this is exactly the same scale as the current hall, and you can see that there's a lot below that. And obviously the servicing and other elements like the key spaces that a livery company needs to do their business. So there is a space often known as a court space, which is at this point in the descent, so at this level here. So that's the sectional idea, and this is something just of a snapshot of the journey. But you come in and then you pass through. As you pass through, you get the view of the tower with the new development to the other side. You also get a glimpse below as you take the staircase, and you find that then you're first at the court level, and then coming down to the lower level with a passage. First, the space that allows you to move into the reception space and the dining. This is the court level here, and then looking back, you also have which is so important in working with underground spaces, always this idea of orientation. So here you see the choreography of the staircase coming down, and then above it the building above ground. So that's the journey, and this is the combined set of parts, as it were, from the public realm to the livery company, and that's where the whole resides, back into the public domain, and all that means for the users of the city. Critically, just in terms of the building and the public amenity, that obviously coming up as a hardworking or tourist in the city, this is the double height winter garden. Will provide views southwards across the city, and then also have the capacity to be able to move around externally. And to have maybe a food market or something of that ilk here, which is to do with just the everyday needs of breakout space and access to the exterior. So this is the idea: maximize the hard landscape by also maximizing or optimizing the greening in vertical elements. Christopher Bradley Hole's concept, and the internal space, which will be rich and botanical. Just an echo of what we managed to achieve with Latz and Partner across the road at the garden at 120, and then the breakout in the office building. We've greened this, and I won't go into detail, and we've been thinking hard about the materiality of the tower, and how it will provide a face within the city that is other than glass at its heart, with this greening and with the spandrel panels that will catch and distribute light. So to the second and completed livery company, which was an absolute delight. It was a competition, and it was actually originally set on the north side of St. Helens Place, which I'll show you in a minute. we like all architects do lots of competitions. Many of them one loses, having done a huge amount of work, and it's understandable when there's a better proposal, of course. In this instance, there was a good deal of thinking about how a hall would work as part of a community, but I quote here briefly a very nice reminiscence, which is not quite as I remembered it, because I think we'd done more work than this, but I did indeed prepare, come to this presentation having not had time to work with our team on the project very much. So this is quoted in the book that was produced. And it was the beginning of actually just a wonderful dialogue with the Hall working group, a small group, who oversaw the entire project. And on the south side of the listed facades, at least on St. Helens Place, this is what was there. It's kind of it was glazed white brick. It was very much the back side, and it was the backdrop for this wonderful church, St. Helens Bishopsgate, which has its own scars to bear from its history. And the idea then came after the initial competition to see whether they could be released, and I was delighted, from the north, which is shadowed and very much overshadowed by the other part of their development, which was an Allies Morrison job at 100 Bishopsgate. The hall would have been again the 7th. The 6th was on the north side. And the opportunity came through a lease to think about whether it could be on the south side, and I really applauded that. I was asked, would it fit? And when thinking about this, I started to draw the location. I suddenly realized this is absolutely, it's one of the epicenters, obviously, of the tall buildings in the cluster. So I started to register the extraordinary nature of transformation and the juxtapositions that became part of the new landscape, and not being frightened of those scalar differences that were set up so well by the Gherkin behind us here later on. But here is this is the 19th century form of this cul-de-sac, which is a bit like walking into the Marais, as part of the freehold of the Leathersellers, who were they had, I called it a drift, because they started life near London Wall and came to this site through a very canny purchase way back. And have had this relationship with that was after the dissolution, of course. There was a convent on one side of the church, and it had its way into, this is a double nave church, very interesting structure. So they migrated, they took up residence in bits of the old monastic order and then changed. And so this is just from some archaeological work before the current buildings of St. Helens Place were built, just to show how the ordering of St. Helens Place here is related to the old chapter house of the convent, and indeed the area that was, at one point was the dining space of the company. But the scars on this wall are still present, of those rather discreet entrances into the nuns' church, being one side of the double nave. So in the first instance, yeah, could they fit? So this just describes how their their need for up to a maximum of 120 seats for dinner might work in the odd geometry of the site. So this is the church. It required some very sensitive engineering of the retention structure along this side of the church, and indeed a lot of proximity in order to get the staircase and the decorum of going to dine to work. And then the scaling of the dining space with the office building above spanning across these bigger spaces in order to allow the freedom of the necessity of the scaling of the key rooms, which in this early sketch sort of provides the basis coming in, cloakroom, an idea of a constrained entrance that then explodes into space around the staircase with the courtroom and a reception space facing south, which was the great advantage with light. And then some smaller spaces. They have a wonderful library, so that's set in this space, which is a smaller dining space used for more informal occasions, of which there are many. And then the lift and the staircase to take you down and then into the dining space, and the idea of kind of creating a sense of the exterior through light, but the presence of the medieval walls, you know, just beyond. So you never lose sight. You're never removed from the reality of orientation. And here the section, because this is a retained facade, listed facade, obviously accessibility achieved by taking away the steps, get that level to run through, giving us the scale of spaces, the courtroom and the reception space, and then actually fitting in the offices into a mezzanine over this side, which works with the scaling, the smaller scaling of the entrance very nicely, so that the offices are sort of snuck in over here. And then of course there's a service stair taking you down and up to those offices. So this is the story of Robert Bird and partners executing this wonderful bit of engineering so close to the medieval structure, with a very consistent and controlled view of any movement. Obviously, it was totally forbidden in terms of the church. The stained glass of the church covered by light boxes for the duration, and then the retention of the wall to St. Helen's Place. But this is how the hole was dug, and you can see this is the constraint of the scaling for the dining space, the key space through here. So here's the section. Obviously the entrance that has an everyday presence, but has to come alight on occasions, on formal occasions. The entrance, the cloakrooms, which are opened up, kind of a hearth, a lararium, that then lets you into this big space that holds the staircase that goes down, and the ordering of that, which we'll come to. The kind of question of recycling, circular economy, if you will, of important aspects and elements of the sixth hall, which was on this side of the site over here. So a 20th century stained glass piece to the founder, Henry VI. So and then actually I'll come to this, the questions of the reuse of some wonderful things, bits of crafting like the scagliola pilasters that stood in the reception space of the sixth hall, and then carpets and leatherwork. So key elements that were retained and recycled. So this is the plan as developed. I'm sorry, this is the other way around to the one I was just describing. But St. Helens Place, this is orientated north. So you're coming in, you've got these ingle nooks that you can sit in. You've got the cloakroom, you've got the entrance to the court, but that can be opened up so that this is one space. So this is a table for 29 that can be dismantled and taken away if the space needs to be used as one continuous space. The service to this from this side, so very important, and then also service to this side, to this smaller dining space. So that idea of how these spaces are serviced is key. The entrance, well, the sixth hall had a pretty, it was columned, it was quite discreet in the corner. I was keen to make something that had that didn't have any interruption to the space, that these animals were part, again, were at the entrance of the sixth hall, and that there should be an element that cantilevered and created a drape and then would have flambeaux on it, and there are flagpoles. So this is just an exploration of that for really to explain the intention to the planners, with the Gherkin standing behind. And this is the completed element, vitreous enamel belly that also takes the fall. So water is taken back. There's some wonderful wrought iron work with the whole top element that was set aside because they couldn't accommodate it in the last. We brought that back and made an over panel to make this work. This is on an evening, and of course with evening light is rather magical to see this in this private domain of St. Helens Place as the first approach into the space. So we were able to retain and reuse the leather paneling from the sixth, and actually were able to have new panels made, particularly for the lift, and to make up a little bit that was needed. And then the leather work, which is pretty sensational. I'll come back to that, with these inglenook seats and a granite floor and skirting. And then these are the scagliola piers, pilasters from the sixth hall, reused with two slightly tonally different plaster renders used as well. So that's one element. The more discrete element, the table that can take 12 in this library, with a conditioned set of cases, the Kolf collection, a kind of remarkable collection of books. One of recent, not so distant bit of research threw up the fact that Shakespeare was a tenant of the Leathersellers when he came to London, so it's dripping with continuity and history. But this is then a lighter palette, and at the other end, you can see how the proximity is to the church. This is very almost, you can put your hand out to touch the fabric of the church at that point. So this is for informal meetings. You turn left, as it were, and then into the court, which has this rich walnut timber work, some of which opens up for more high-tech issues. Other parts hang the original charters, which are magnificent in themselves, And then this is an Axminster carpet cut down in length from the original reception space to be reused. And you can see the way that it's a kind of, it has a gravitas. The paneling runs over to create this this centered space, and then the view into the optimism and light of the south-facing reception space. But this is the charter, the original charter. Wonderful. It shouldn't say 1944. And then into part of the other great crafting elements of this. In the reception space, I was keen that there should be a sculpture, maybe not a chandelier, but something that could hang as a significant piece, and suggested Dale Chihuly, and he rose to the occasion magnificently. This is his hot works with the pigments, and the pigments are very interesting when one comes to the description of the tapestry. Those solid bars of glass pigment that are part of the process of making. So the hot shop and all that it entails, fantastic drama, and then this piece that he created, which is very explosive and uses blue. Which is very difficult to draw through the clear glass, but it's a magnificent. This is it hung in Seattle and demonstrating the light, because it doesn't have light within it; it's light cast onto it. And here's the finished piece. And once we'd established this, I was able to get cracking on the idea of the carpet and a table at the center, which is part of a sort of axis that is about continuity. So the precedent for this, in a way, is the Cosmati pavements generally, and the sort of sense of time, and then a riff off Dale Chihuly's piece with lacquered panels as opposed to timber panels. And then as you get in this room, either veiled or open to the church with its own stained glass beyond, and a terrace beyond that to break out from this room, and then the rather particular hide sofas that are appropriate to the company, and indeed the pulls on the doors, and so forth. The table itself takes a quote from the charter, so 1444, that should have read, and it is essentially a paean to community and continuity through community, which is what the guilds and livery companies in these mercantile centres, whether it be Venice or the Hanseatic Baltic, are all about. And the very beautiful casting and finishing of those letters for the table, which is made in a base and then engineered, very carefully engineered, structuring and very stable, and then this glass insert to allow the reading of that axis sort of mundi. So that the process of making the carpet, designing that, and then in the back of my mind was how to reset these. I loved the scagliola. I couldn't bear to throw it away. So we had those. We had to make a list of things we wanted to keep. Those were I think there were 17 in an odd number, curious number in the sixth hall, and they were packed away because, of course, they're made as singular pieces on a timber framing in the great stucco tradition, and then we had to set about seeing about how it could be reinstated. Now I had this this idea of this magnificent space of Giulio Romano's and the Palazzo del Te, of kind of collapse, sort of in stasis. That was the idea. So here they are in the 6th hall, and indeed there's the carpet. Here they are being packed away carefully. Just a celebration of great craftsmanship, and then our studies of the various panels. So the courtroom we've seen the reception space. We're going to see a little bit more of the stair hall, and then we'll get to the dining space. So this was the idea of these pieces caught, reassembled, top light cutting through them, south light, and then the stair, and the importance of always, again, keeping your orientation as you move through it. It's going through about 9.5 meters to get to the dining hall level, and that would have been too vertiginous in a way for many. So the idea was then to create a collar in leather, and working with Bill Amberg and his studio, and the great, crafting and stitching of these pieces. I said that we wanted leather here, and he said, well, I've got a really, it's very interesting to be able to take the faience, which is a kind of a field of red and blue, and how that merges like a lavender field. So as you look at it in light, it has a glow and a depth, and translate that idea into leather. So that's what we set about doing. This is, one has to remember that, like writing, only one person can do the stitching. Otherwise, you get discontinuity. So there's this wonderful, see, that's a single hide. I mean, it's completely magical, really. And the whole history and craft of leatherwork is phenomenal. And something is so much with us. It's so good from industrial, kind of elements in water. It's brilliant. It forms washers. But it's just great for shoes and other wear. So it's a wonderful part of a cycle of use, and very, very present. So this is the idea. You have these niches that are lit, as are some of the spaces between the rooms, so they could house some of their collection. And on the landing, the first landing, you have the kind of world of ablutions. Very important, that moment of being able to change, have a wash, spruce up a bit. And I felt that really needed a decorum. And then this is actually the mezzanine level plan, so we jumped. So this is you can see, this is the Clark space, or the window looking into the void, the double height space of the stairs. And the small amount of offices that obviously needed in terms of a livery company. But coming down back to that level, you have this entrance, and now this is precisely balanced in terms of genders. We happen to be looking at the male, but there's also the equivalent, obviously, for the female. So again, lacquer, and then these walnut spaces that are the loos and indeed showers, the urinals, and then a space for just brushing your hair and washing, and a kind of discretion between the two, but it's one world. And I think incredibly important in terms of its care. But back to the leather. So, this is Chesterfield. This is Bill Amberg. I went up. We were looking at hides. We were, there was a struggle. But what this is taking the neck of the beast. Here's one of our samples of the building faience, and it is then dyeing that. So this is the creasing is because of the neck. That takes the color, and then the color is taken back and finished. And so this is the process of getting to this point on the staircase, with the containment at the first level, so that you don't get too much of a void, which finally takes you down to the list of previous masters and so on, and then the view back up this elliptical staircase with an ovoid, shape, and then glass that is curved and cut to avoid, it getting involved in the rises and treads, which are granite with the staircase between, and then down to the bottom, as it were, which is also the entrance into the great moment of the dining space. So here you have that section taking you down, and here the dining space, just cutting back to the original idea, but also glimpses of the medieval wall from the dining space, and a striking horizon at about 3.1 meters for the paneling here, which is very different to the vertical paneling in the court space. Here it is before the commission for the tapestry was in. This is the cartoon place, because the tapestry is very long and took over 2.5 years to make up at Dovecote Studios. So here's the bay for the pianist, which is top lit, the view of the church wall beyond, and then these La Nuit Americaine, these glazed boxes the color of which can be warm or light, to do with lunch or evening sitting, and that then was transformed into this history of the company, so that when you arrive with your guest, you can run back to kind of the tradition of using leather, through the medieval period, through the heraldic elements, through the making, the leaves that are used in the tanning process, and then round right to the a magnificent work, and just to remind that pigmented glass of Dale Chihuly is kind of echoed in the wonderful pigmented dyed wools that you find in a tapestry weaving company's world, where moving from the artists' cartoons and drawings into the reality of the tapestry takes the great skill of the master weavers, who have to put those colored threads onto these elements that they're threading through, looking at the cartoon on the other side, working in this horizontal run that is placed on the loom vertically, an incredible subtlety that's possible here. These bobbins and the process of laying it out there. Some of these dyes are incredibly valuable, going back to the early 20th century, and very, very irreplaceable. Here they are working on the Chrysophylle tapestry, which is commissioned by the Clothworkers, interestingly. So it will be, of course, something that is part of the transition from one hall to another. So Victoria Crowe, the artist who is Edinburgh-based, worked brilliantly through the process of transformation from metamorphosis from one medium to another. And then finally, you would have seen those panels below. They were conceived to take artwork, and there was the working group, and the company itself decided that they'd lost their great portraits from the 19th century through war damage, because their hall also was blitzed and rebuilt after the war. So they didn't have a great collection, and of course there is a cycle in terms of familial continuities in many livery companies. But they set that aside, and they actually asked me if I could help them with the choice of art. And because of Victoria Crow's brilliantly polychromatic, and I always felt that element above the paneling should be polychromatic. But because of that work, it felt to me that actually what you needed, and the metamorphosis through different media, that whatever went on these panels should express the artist's mark, and it would be best to be monochromatic. Leon Kossoff was suggested to me, and I took that idea to the Leathersellers, and they have purchased a series of these wonderful drawings that now are on the walls of the dining space. They are wonderful because there's so much about London. The livery companies are so much about London. It's about, I mean, Kossoff's drawings of King's Cross and its transformation are so much to do with a continuity and an eagle eye to the process of making, and obviously, you know, his drawings of Christchurch, and these are all very much part of his world, his growing up in London. So it's very appropriate that they are the drawings that now are on the walls of the Livery Company dining space. So there we are. I don't have, that's more up to date, so that's been since this image. But I think it's a very great asset to the hall. And then the other things have been changed. There's a new heraldic piece in leather that is there now as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you, Eric, very much. So spectacular, fascinating buildings, and wonderful interiors too, which I think we all feel very envious of course, being able to deliver such great pieces. I mean, I don't think we have the budget quite to cover Temple Bar in leather or anything like that, but we hope we can provide some great interiors. But I've just had a couple of questions. We're running quite close to time, but first of all, what actually prompted the cloth workers to redevelop their hall? I mean, was it seeing what you had done at the Leathersellers that actually made them sort of think they might do something? I think I had no idea. Well, I mean, obviously, I have, you know, there's no doubt that, and this is known now, these livery companies and their holdings in the city, very important part of the city's development. They must have looked at their site and wondered about its potential, because it does look like a bit of kind of tooth decay in the new world of the city. So, you know, I mean, and actually there's that sort of sense of what is the worth of the existing? Could it be listed? The answer was no. It wasn't of that quality. Therefore, they had the opportunity to take. It hasn't come to be yet, but as long as the city is thriving at some point, I guess they will benefit hugely, and their charities will benefit hugely from the opportunity of doing this. But really, that is, you know, I am the simple architect coming in to create a spatial proposition. They are and their professional advisors are the ones who could answer your question, Peter. Yes, but it's also quite interesting, of course, that in the morning sun, that area around the tower the old tower, gets bathed in a green light from your building the other side of the road, doesn't it? Reflecting off that diachromatic glass.
Yeah. So it's varied. The reflection is varied in terms of its color and time, but it's like a sundial, isn't it? It moves and it animates the space, and it will I think it will shed a very different light once this building, if it is built.
Yes. So you showed a view, I think, from the south. From the view from Waterloo Bridge, do you actually fill the gap between Vignoli and the cluster?
Yeah, it's stepping form was very much thought about in those terms. Well, it doesn't really fill the gap, because between us then is buildings like Plantation Place. So it's a jagged edge, but the idea is to create difference as ever, and to create that sort of sense of that green wall, which is a carefully considered element of the composition that will be very important marker, I think. But it's not filling the gap at all. It's a rising where there isn't a space. So it's filling a void, but not the whole canvas, if you will.
And glazed terracotta or a faience or ceramic, I'm never quite sure what the right word is to use, but I mean, that's a material that you're very fond of and you use a lot, isn't it? I mean, and it is, many others are following you now. Yeah,
I've used it in sort of rather specific ways. It's where one wants a certain quality of levitation and reflection. I feel happy with it. Where I would feel terribly, worried about using stone in a floating way. Stone seems to me to be a material that needs to come to ground, and it obviously has a potential to have a very differentiated hierarchy in terms of the ground and what might be on the top as an urn, but to float it seems to me inconceivable. So when working with that entrance piece, this idea that's what faience allows. Yeah, I've used it in different ways, obviously, as at the back of the Leathersellers is also, it's more like masonry in a way, like the tradition of the 19th century and 30s, like Piccadilly. But this idea that you've got this atlas element that is nonetheless light and is full of the expectation of going down, it felt to me that it was very appropriate that we should think about faience. And it's a beautiful, it's very animate. It's got movement in it, and that is a beautiful thing. Because of the light, especially the form, if the form is right.
So I think just one final question from me is that I mean, it's interesting. Maybe it is to do with their understanding of property values, but I'm surprised that one of the two didn't actually want to have their hall at the top of the building rather than down in the basement.
Yes. I think that well, there are many answers. There's pragmatic answers, and does everyone? It's much more comfortable, really. Yeah, why not? But it's more comfortable to be able to walk in and go through a sequence that is easy than getting in a lift and going all the way to the top of the building. Though there are great advantages to being up, but actually, you could also say you've got to find those spans. So you could also say that might be easier at the top. Why not? The next one might be. Good idea, Peter.
So we do have just one question here from Greg Smith, and say, will Star Alley remain and its name?
Yeah, it will not remain in name, except that it will be part of the landscape So the detailing of the landscape marks that. It's obviously an incredibly important part of the history of this space. So it doesn't disappear. It happily, I mean, there's some nice events on there. There was a good greasy spoon in it. But I think, the new public realm is so important that it will be a ghosting that is part of the hard landscape. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Erica. I mean, it's given me lots of ideas, because if we need to expand Temple Bar, of course, underneath Paternoster, there are large basements there already. So perhaps we could actually build a bigger space underground without too much excavation. But that's been a splendid lecture. Thank you very much indeed, and wonderful to see all that work, and good luck delivering the Clothworkers building, because that looks a great addition to the townscape, but obviously a great addition to the livery as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity to discuss with you.
Very good. Okay. Good night.
Good night now.